All right, guys, welcome back. iCoach VIP members. Guys, today I have a very special guest, somebody that I met in Scottsdale, Arizona, with this crazy mastermind group that I keep talking about. So without further ado, Mr. William Grazione. How are you, my
What's
man?
going on, man? I'm doing excellent, Justin. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. As y'all can see, he has like the world's coolest glasses in the world. So dude, for the viewers, for the listeners, tell us a little bit more about like you. Who are you? What do you do? How did you come into the fitness field, man?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So my name is William Grazione. I am the owner of Metabolic Evolution Incorporated, which is an online nutrition and training consulting business. Came into the space in 2010 when I first made my business full time. And ever since then, our goal has been to try to educate and guide the world to, I guess you could say, more realistic expectations when it comes to nutrition and training, specifically for the general population and physique athletes.
Got it. That's awesome, man. And how long have you been kind of like either competing or working with people in the field now?
Sure. Eight. This will be my ninth year. So I prepped my first bodybuilder in 2010, and I also in 2010 we also earned, I believe, 3 to 4 pro cards that year before I had ever even started a business.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. We've been in the field probably pretty close the same amount of time. So I
Oh,
started
very
as
cool.
a personal trainer right out of high school in 2010. So
Nice. Very cool.
but dude, so obviously we met back in Scottsdale. We talked a little bit, and you kind of shared a little bit of your story with me, kind of a little bit more on the surface level. But one of the things that like really jumped out to me was just kind of some of the struggles, in the beginning, and how you've kind of overcome so much adversity to get to where you are today. So, can you just like maybe take us back to like 2005, 2010, whatever that range was. And like, maybe let's just dive back into like, what were you doing like in the very beginning when you first got into all this? And then
Hmm.
we'll start kind of just taking it from there.
Yeah. So maybe if you want to take it like I'd say maybe during college, or you want to go like post graduation.
So your first show that you ever did was in
Okay.
2010. Was that right?
2010. Yep.
Okay. So maybe we start like maybe like give us a little bit more kind of surface level, because I know that you were in sports, like you played football, things like that. So maybe
Sure.
start there and kind of how that influenced you, and then we'll dive into when you actually got in the field.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, growing up as a child, man, I saw a lot of things that I'm very grateful for that I saw now because it essentially helped create who I was. But at the same time, me having to observe a lot of the things that happened as a child with my mother and my father, it created this intensified aggression and anger in me as a kid. And basically, the way that I was able to stumble upon the sport of football was that I believe I was 11 years old, and a friend of the family actually came over because her son was going to start playing little league football. And they're like, hey, well, Bill's a strong kid. So I had already been lifting weights when I was 11 for probably like 3 to 4 years. So I was already kind of just naturally, just stronger than all the other kids in the neighborhood. And at the time, I didn't even know what football was. And my friend's mom came over and she's like, hey, Bill, you want to play football? I'm like, what is football? She's like, oh, like the Tampa Bay Bucks. And I'm like, oh, with the helmet and the shoulder pads and all that. I'm like, yeah, I want to play. And quickly what I realized was that I had a talent for it. And I do think that it was because of I was just a naturally athletic kid, because a lot of the time, the way that I took my anger and my aggression out was either by sprinting, lifting weights, wrestling kids in the neighborhood. And it just so happened to be that I could transfer a lot of that energy into playing football. A few years later, I was a Pinellas County All-Star as a Little League, and then I made the All-Star team for Pinellas County in high school as well. And then that got me some attention, and I was able to get a football scholarship to go away and play college football in Oklahoma, which, was an amazing experience. But then again, I'm still kind of fighting this internal aggression and this internal rage to take out all of that was built up because of, again, like what I witnessed as a child. And, I took everything out physically. later on in my life, which I'll talk about, I learned that I needed to do that to be able to tap into what I'm capable of mentally, right? So I think that a lot of times we hold in a lot of these things that could essentially make us like superhuman. Like for me, all of that anger, that rage, that aggression, I took it out physically. Now, taking it out verbally is another thing, but then we can talk about the fact that I had a speech impediment and I did not talk. So I couldn't display how I felt emotionally or verbally because I had a speech impediment, and I was fearful that people were going to make fun of me, right? So I took everything out physically. Everything was about anger. Everything was about aggression. And once I got injured so many times playing football, I mean, guys, I blew my ACL out when I was 14 years old in high school, shattered both of my meniscuses. In my first year in college, I ruptured my patella straight off the kneecap, shattered my meniscus again. And then as a junior, I tore my MCL off my right knee. And at the end of that, I was like, you know what? Maybe football just is not the thing for me. Granted, like, I'm 5'8". I was 225 pounds at the time, and just realized that 5'8" linebackers in the NFL probably just wasn't like a realistic thing. And what quickly happened was that I fell in love with fitness. I fell in love with lifting weights, and I fell in love with lifting weights so much that I immediately kind of left football behind me. Football was a thing that, like, I don't know if any of your audience has ever played football, but you are basically in a position where every single season you're just beating the crap out of yourself, right? You are literally beating the crap out of yourself. You're losing a bunch of weight. You're losing a bunch of strength. You're injuring yourself. And then every off season, you're spending that time trying to grow bigger and stronger to only beat yourself up again. And I fell in love with the process of bodybuilding because I never had a season anymore. Right? Like the season was gone and I could just continuously progress over the course of time, and, graduated and quickly found myself in a position where I did not know what to do. Because I feel like, college kind of set me up to work for somebody else. And I'm sure that a lot of your listeners can relate to this, because academia does. Academia sets us up to work for a company or to work for somebody else, never necessarily teaching the concepts of entrepreneurship or the fact that being a very successful entrepreneur is even a thing. And so when I graduated from college, all of my efforts were being put into trying to find a career within a larger firm. And my chosen path at the time was physical therapy school. So everything that I did was catered towards physical therapy school. And the reason that I stopped pursuing that was because I quickly realized that it was going to cost me $100,000 to get my master's degree in physical therapy. And if you want to stop there, that kind of jump starts my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. No, so there's definitely some points I want to touch on there for sure. And we have a lot of similarities actually just from hearing that story.
Yeah.
First thing I want to dive into was, so you mentioned you started lifting weights at 11 years old.
I got my first curl bar around 6. So I started doing curls around 6, just because my uncle was really into it. And at my 6th birthday, it was either my birthday or at Christmas, he got me a curl bar with the cement weights. And he put like a 2.5 on each side. And he's like, "Hey, boo-boo, curl this 20 times. And I'm like, all right. Curled it 20 times. And I think at the age of like 6 or 7 was the first time I ever got like a real pump in my biceps. And from that point, dude, I just fell in love with it.
Wow. Okay, so 6 years old, not 11. Got it.
Yeah.
That's crazy, because I think with myself, I first started like lifting weights like in middle school football, so 7th grade,
Yeah.
And even then, like, I talked to so many people, like I'm sure clients you work with too, Gym Pop, like there's a lot of people that don't touch weights or start working out until they're like done with college. So, I think that's like, it's something we kind of like fell into, but I think that was something that's like so impactful, like whether it's the workout side of it or whether it's the nutrition side of it, like how can we start to get people into that at the earliest age possible? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the kind of the underlying issue is that how many adults are fearful of resistance training?
A lot.
Right. And how many adults by their own decisions impact their children?
That's true.
Just about all of them, right? So if the adult themselves is fearful of resistance training, or the adult themselves lack the confidence to be able to go into the gym, lift weights, work out, then they're most likely going to employ that onto their children, right? And it just so happened to be that my uncle was very forceful in it. You know, my uncle was somebody who, he was always about strength, and he was always about being like a man and being strong. And so for me to see him be like motivated for me to start lifting and to get strong, I just started to do it and I liked it. Now, granted, I wouldn't say that it'd be ideal for every kid to start lifting weights at 6 years old, but today I don't think it had like a negative effect on me. I think that had I been taught how to lift properly at a very early age, who knows what would have come from it. But for me personally, what really came out of it was a lot of personal physical confidence. So within my physical abilities, I was extremely confident, whether it was how strong I was, whether it was aesthetically what I looked like, even in middle school, you know, whether it was a kind of me like setting myself apart from all the other kids. I knew at a very young age that I just had something that was different, something that separated me from everybody else, something that nobody was doing at the time. And when I started playing football at 11, you know, and other parents would like look at me and stuff, and they all thought that I was in the wrong age bracket, right? Because I'm at the peak of the weight. Like I've got veins in my arms. Like, you know, it's like, you just typically didn't see that at 11, you know? And then by the time I was in middle school, you know, the fact that, you know, I could bench around like 200 pounds in 8th grade. And nobody had really, you know, people never really saw that, you know, and like the dads on the team were like, God, you're freaking stronger than I am. But, you know, again, kids need something to be confident in. They need something to stand behind. And for me, because I wasn't confident verbally, or I couldn't communicate, I was very confident in my physical ability, whether it be my ability to, you know, take on an opponent in football, whether it be if somebody was trying to pick fun at me. And also that having that confidence allowed me to stick up for other people, because in school, we see a lot of people getting bullied, and that's a huge problem. I was the kid that would go pick on the bully or stop the bully from attacking a kid that was weaker than he was. So had I not had that, or had my uncle not implemented that in me, there probably would have been a lot of other kids in my middle school that most likely would have been bullied and picked on, because I wouldn't have had that confidence to stand up to them.
Wow. That's powerful, man. I mean, I think like having an influence in our life, you know, at such an early age like that, I mean, it's really impactful. Another thing I wanted to touch on, you know, you mentioned kind of having like the speech impediment, right? And this is something, you know, I have like dyslexia, I have ADD, ADHD, like whatever you want to call it. Like I was the kid that like, I couldn't read books. My wife, for example, she can read 3 books in the time that I read 1. So I always thought that I was just like stupid, or, you know, whatever it was. But what I realized later on, actually not till college, was that if I watched video or I listened to audio, I retain everything. Like that's the way that I learn. Unfortunately, I didn't learn that until, you know, college. But was that something you mentioned, like the speech impediment? What was that exactly? Like,
dude, I can completely relate to you. I don't think I ever got confident in reading until probably just recently. I can recall very vividly my mother and I getting in arguments at a very young age, because I just did not want to read. I was very artistic, and I was very good at art. So drawing, painting, and things like that. And the awesome part about that is that I was able to be recognized for those endeavors. Right. So then it kind of made reading and like all of the other academic stuff not feel like it was as important to me, because again, I was really good at art. And so I just didn't, dude, I didn't read, really didn't talk much. The only way that people found out that I had a stutter was when, you know, I was very passionate about something, and I would then try to communicate that. And, you know, nobody ever put me in any speech classes or anything in school, because I just didn't talk. So nobody knew I had a problem. But yeah, definitely with the reading, I can 100% agree with you and empathize there. But with regards to the communication, what I realized was that in my 30s, the speech impediment had actually came from my experiences with adult men. Okay. So the adult men that I had in my life at the time, and this is at a very, very young age, were very overpowering, right? In the sense of like they would stand over you and kind of point their finger at you. And when you would try to communicate or you would try to speak, you would get stuck, right? Because they would constantly shut you up every time. So you kind of develop this stutter and this, this inability to get the words out because you're constantly being just belittled over and over and over again. And this creates that speech impediment. In my opinion, I feel like that's how it started. So again, whenever I was going through my adolescence and things, and I would try to communicate about things I was passionate about, my peers would then pick fun at me. So then that made me be like, you know what? I'm good with the physical stuff. I'm just going to draw and I'm going to lift weights and I'm going to play sports. But other than that, I'm just not going to talk. Right. And, that kind of stretch, dude, like, and everybody just thought I was the shy kid. When in reality, I wasn't speaking because I had that stutter. This kind of kept moving forward through middle school, through high school. And then once I got into college and they moved me to a middle linebacker and they're like, and I had to call the plays, that was when I had to like step it up and kind of overcome that, but at the same time, I never gave myself the time to actually work on myself. I just took what my strengths were and I tried to capitalize on those, which, it got me all the way through college and graduation and all of that. But if I could go back in time, and something that I would urge your audience to do, no matter where they are, is to spend the time and just work on yourself. Spend the time and work on some of the things that maybe you're not that confident with. Like a lot of my confidence that I lacked in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey came from my inability to speak and communicate. So like me getting on a video just like this, or me trying to do a video for YouTube, oh my God, forget about it. Like I had so much anxiety around it that I realized that was something that I had to work on. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it all started with the speech impediment, and then, kind of allowing it to control my life for the majority of my life. And now just recently overcoming it and pushing forward to be able to spread this type of message to people like your audience who may be going through something very, very similar.
Wow, that's powerful, man. I love that. Another thing I wanted to touch on is, because this really resonated with me. I grew up playing sports my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
As, same with you, I always realized that I was really, really good at working out. Like, yeah. I got a scholarship to go play football in college as well, but it was a small school. It was more of like, I just wanted to say I played college football.
Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
But, what I realized like in high school and even in college was that like, I was a kid that like really took working out like really serious. Like everybody was like, "Why are you working out so hard?" And I'm like, I'm just good at it. Like we had a powerlifting team in high school, and like all 4 years we qualified for state. Like as a senior in high school, like I was in the 181 class and I back squatted 600 pounds. So like I was really, really strong.
Dude, that's crazy.
I know. But what was funny is that like as I went into into college, I realized I was like, damn, like I'm not good at sports. Like I'm okay, but I'm not like great, but what I'm great at is like working out. And then that's when CrossFit came and I was like, oh, the sport of working out, like this is me,
Right. Yeah. Dude, I completely understand that. And I think there are people who are like that, like, and I was like that too. And I can specifically remember like a group of maybe 3 to 5 of us who we would just love to work out. Like we just love to work out almost as much as like playing the actual sport. For me, eventually getting to a sport where I enjoy working out more than I like playing the game of football, because, obviously you're aware that, when you get to that elite level of college, the type of athletes and the type of instinct that those athletes have is, it is incredible. Like, we would get a lot of guys from like the big time Division I schools and stuff. And just to see the amount of athletic ability that they had, the way that they could change direction, the way that they could read plays, the way that they could instinctually know where something was going. and just the power that they could deliver was incredible. And I believe that it was probably like my sophomore, junior year, I realized that, probably this isn't going to work out for me. So I should probably find something else, just focus on my academics, get my degree, and then eventually stumbling into bodybuilding, which really helped kind of catapult me into what I do now.
That's awesome, man. So yeah, so as we kind of transition into that, so you finished school, you graduated with your degree in exercise science.
Yep.
So very similar. I was trying to decide, should I do like kinesiology or nutrition? And at that time, like I was a personal trainer, and so I was like, everybody does kines or exercise science. Maybe I'll just go this route.
Right.
But you finish school and then you get into the world of bodybuilding. Like, I guess 2 questions. 1, how did you get into bodybuilding in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2, like, what was it that made you, I know this was recently, but like, what made you overcome the battle of the anxiety that came along with doing video and things like this? Like, so we'll touch on the first question first, and then we'll dive into that one a little bit later. But yeah, how did you get into bodybuilding? Who introduced you to that?
Yeah. So, well, you know what? When my uncle put that curl bar in my hand, he called me Boo Boo Schwarzenegger, right? And that was at 6. So I'm like, who's this Arnold Schwarzenegger guy? Like, and then my uncle, I believe he showed me a picture of him one day, and I was like, wow, like I couldn't believe it. I'm like, well, this is a guy actually looks like this. So then therefore I was always interested in like what muscle looked like. I was very into things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And if you remember that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie, dude, those turtles were jacked, right? And I'm like, man, like if I could just have arms like Leonardo or Raphael, like that'd be amazing. And so I just kind of continuously lifted weights throughout my adolescence because I realized that if I lifted weights and I was strong, and then I reached the football days, that it actually had a benefit and a carryover in life. So then I realized that there was a lot of benefits when it came to resistance training and just being stronger than other humans. I know, like Mark Bell says, like strength is never a weakness, right? And I firmly believe that. And the way I got into bodybuilding was I was 14 years old. I was working out at a gym in Saint Petersburg, Florida, called the Pumping Station. Okay. It was straight up bro gym. Like there was all bodybuilders in there. They're all on drugs and they're just all jacked up dudes. And, like that was the first time I ever saw somebody just raw bench like 500 pounds, like squat, like 5-6 plates on each side with perfect form. Had all these guys with just veins popping out everywhere. And I'm like, man, like they just incredible. And one day I'm in there doing curls and this bodybuilder walks over to me. And he was a smaller guy. He was probably about like 180 pounds, maybe 5'8". And he just looked amazing. And he goes, hey, man, you ever thought about bodybuilding? And I was 14, right? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm a football player, man. Like, he's like, well, like, I think you got the genetics for it. Like, how old are you? And I'm like, 14. And he's like, I wish I looked like that when I was 14. And I'm like, well, maybe if this football thing doesn't work out, maybe I'll try bodybuilding. And it was kind of like that all throughout my college days and everything. And then once I got into like really working out and I saw the benefit of not having to, I guess you'd say, beat the crap out of myself every football season, I just dove into bodybuilding. And then what I immediately became infatuated with was trying to research bodybuilding shows and trying to find natural bodybuilders. So to that point in time, everybody that I was looking at, and I think at the time, Ronnie Coleman had just won the Olympia title, right? I think it was his first year being Mr. Olympia, which I think was 2008 or 2009. And so guys like Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Flex Wheeler, Kevin Lavroni, guys like this that I was looking at on, like YouTube and like Googling them. I mean, they were just like, they were the kings of the sport. And I never thought that I could get that big, right? Because I'm like, there's got to be something going on. Like, these guys are 5'8", 5'10", and they weigh 270 pounds. Like at the time I think I was 205 pounds. I'm like, how am I going to gain 70 pounds of muscle, right? And lose like, probably at the time I probably needed to lose like 40 to 50 pounds of fat. I'm just like, there's got to be a different way to bodybuild. And so I started, just jumping on Google, and I started researching everything I could about bodybuilding and how to prepare for a bodybuilding show. And I stumbled upon a gentleman named Dave Gooden, Dr. Joe Klemczewski, and Layne Norton. And all of their information, to me, being an exercise science major, it all made very clear sense. So along with the degree that I earned in exercise science, once I started bodybuilding, I realized how important nutrition was. So, I took some extra nutrition courses just kind of on the side, because I realized that I was going to need it at some point in time. And, Dave, Layne, Dr. Joe, they basically were the first ones that were putting out this amazing information. And again, I just related with it because, again, I had a degree, I had some, basic understanding of physiology. And so I just became a student of their work. And so much so to where I would try to bring some of this information to my college courses. And my professors would ultimately get mad at me because I'm trying to bring up topics that they're not even familiar with. And so then that's kind of how the obsession started with bodybuilding, was that I became obsessed with the information that was available online. And granted, guys, there was not a lot of stuff in 2008, 2009 about natural bodybuilding. But I just so happened to find the right wormhole, and I started to navigate through it and find everything I needed. And then the other thing that really made it awesome for me was actually going to my college courses and being like, my professor doesn't even understand this. I must be onto something here. You know what I mean? And from that point, then I began an internship as a personal trainer, and really dove into trying to transform my body to get ready for my very first competition season, which would come in 2010.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That's such a cool story. I mean, I always think back, kind of like how I got into the field, and I don't know about you, but do you ever think to yourself, like, what if you wouldn't have found those three people? Like, what if you would have gone down another rabbit hole and found something that was, I don't know, right? Like, it's so crazy because, I mean, Layne Norton, he was somebody that, I found very, very early on too. Mm-hmm. But I always just think back to that. I'm like, man, like my mentors and the people that I follow, like they influenced me like over the past 10 years. Mm-hmm. And if I would have maybe gone down a different rabbit hole and maybe found different people, like I just kind of think how would I have ended up? Like, what would my philosophy be?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think about that all the time. I mean, even if it's like me just thinking about my life. So there have been a lot of adversities that I've kind of had to go through, and a lot of things that I look back at today and I'm like, how was I the one that actually like made it out? Because so I come from very humble beginnings, and an area where not very many people get the opportunity to go to college, or not very many people can stick to academia, receive a degree, come out and create a business. Like, so when I look back, like, to like the little league days, and it's like, I was in my understanding, and like looking back historically, all the kids that I played little league with, like I believe I was the only one that got a scholarship to go play football. In high school, we had 9 to 10 athletes that signed football scholarships at my high school, and I was the only one that graduated from college. Looking back now, it's like, out of all the people that got the football scholarships, I was the only one to graduate from college that year and create, a few businesses and reach a level of success in my life where I have the opportunity to impact the world. So I always think back about stuff like that, because it could be one path, it could be one change in direction that can change your entire life. And, I think that that's very, very intriguing, and something that I will put a lot of, I'll say something that I put a lot of my faith in is my belief in the Lord, right? So I've always believed ever since I was a child that there was something greater, somebody that I could communicate with, somebody that was there who was looking out after my life, because I went through a lot of things at a very young age to where I just needed somebody to talk to about it. And I couldn't talk to my friends. I couldn't talk to my mom. I couldn't talk to my dad. So I just had this belief that there was this thing called God, and this Lord that I could just go find a quiet place and just talk to about my entire life. And I always had this underlying faith that everything was going to work out the way that it was supposed to. And a lot of my friends, you know, they would kind of criticize me for wanting to do that. And what I look back at now is like, he's always been there with me my entire life. Even though, and that's the only reason I'm here. That's the only reason I survived being attacked. That's the only reason I learned from the very valuable lessons that I learned as a child. That's the only reason I'm still alive, is because of my belief in the Lord. And I truly believe that.
I love that, man. I talk about my story transparently all the time, and, you know, I don't know how much you know about that, but, you know, when I was 18 years old, I got locked up in jail and wasn't religious at all at the time. And that night, you know, turned to a Bible and read the Bible the whole entire night and like asked for a second chance. And that second chance 10 years ago literally has been fueling my life for the past 10 years. So I'm a big believer as well. And I think that, you know, it's very easy to fall into kind of this place of like loneliness. And it's really easy to fall into a place of maybe hopelessness. And I think like just being able to have someone that's bigger than yourself, that's not a wife, not a husband, not, you know, not a friend, but just something, call it God, call it whatever you want to call it, but something that's bigger than you, and something that, like, I make the comment all the time. I'm like, what I'm doing, like what you're doing in this world, like it's so much bigger than us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
100%. Yeah, man. I mean, I guess I'll just go ahead and share this, because again, it's a big part of my life that has ultimately allowed me to step into who I am now. But you know, I was 18 years old, and I was attending a party with some of my high school friends right before I was going away to college. And, you know, granted, like, they weren't going to see me for a while, so they kind of peer pressured me to go out with them. And what happened that night was that I was approached by this gentleman who was clearly a drug addict. And after an altercation where basically what I tried to do was I tried to create my own personal space with him, he pulls out a switchblade while I'm not looking at him and slices my face open from my lip all the way to my ear. So you can see me visually, but so I have a scar from my lip all the way to my ear. And basically what happened was that I had tried to create personal space. I'm like, hey, man, I don't want any problems. Please back away from me. And I turned around to start talking to my friends again. And what I thought was a face slap turned out to be probably the most horrific moment of my entire life, because basically what I felt was that when I turned around to look at the gentleman, he had this insane smile on his face. And I looked down at his hand, and he had a switchblade, just like a barber would use to shave you, hanging open in his hand with my blood dripping off of it. Right? And quickly I realized that I did not get slapped, and my body went initially very cold. I was in shock. And my whole face just like dropped open. Like my face was hanging off of my face. And all the blood that was just pouring out, I just watched a river just flow down my shirt, down my pants, all the way to my ankles. And that was a moment in my life that was a turning point, because what I realized was that after kind of going through the procedure of getting my face sewn back together and having to have my mom see me right after that happened, and having had the doctor tell my mom that, you know, Mrs. Young, you know, if your son would have been cut 2 inches lower, he would have hit his jugular vein, and the amount of time that it took for him to get to the hospital probably would not have been sufficient, and he probably would have died. Right? So standing in front of my mom with a physician telling me this, looking at the tears in my mom's eyes, that was like, this is your second chance, right? So just like you going to prison, finding the Bible and reading it, asking for a second chance, and you got it and you're freaking crushing it. My second chance was just the fact that I didn't get cut 2 inches under the scar I have on my face.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And then it just so happened that the football scholarship that I got was to a non-Christian college. And about a year later, I now know that the Lord called me to a Christian college, and I ended up transferring. And, you know, it was mandatory for us to go to Bible study 3 days a week, and, you know, for us to say prayer and for us to give thanks. And give gratitude and all of that. And again, that was something that really helped me throw more wood on my faith, right? Because at the time I was kind of like, this is something that only I do, you know, like I only pray to God, like it's only my time with him and my communication with him. But then it allowed me to throw more wood on that and burn that fire a bit more. And, you know, now I'm in a position where I'm just eternally grateful to still be here and to create the impact in the world that I'm here to create.
Wow. Dude, that's amazing, man. Like when I first met you in Scottsdale, I remember seeing the scar.
Yeah.
I asked about it then, but
yeah.
Wow, dude, that's
yeah, a lot of people see it, man, you know, but like not very many people want to ask about it, you know. Funny story for you, but I was actually out in Los Angeles at Amanda Bucci's Flourish and Conquer Accelerator program last time she had it, which was about 4 months ago. And, you know, I had the opportunity to speak out there, and it was amazing. And right when I got off stage, this woman came to the event, and I could tell she was a very spiritual woman. And there's something about Los Angeles. I don't know if you've ever been there or not, but there's something about Los Angeles to where there's a lot of individuals who are very spiritually connected to themselves. And she approached me and she was like, I know you have a story and I want to know about it. And I'm like, how do you know? She's like, well, that beautiful scar on your face. And that turned into like an hour-long conversation to where, you know, she wanted to know about it because her take was like, you know, she wanted to know about the struggle. She wanted to be able to help me. And she just found it very inquisitive that, you know, that I had this, or very interesting that I had this, because from what she said, you know, back in the day, there was a lot of men that had a lot of scars, right? And it essentially created character because, well, from what she said, behind every scar, there was a story. And what she realized is that nowadays there's not a lot of guys with scars. And it's because she thinks that a lot of guys aren't necessarily going through that same kind of struggle that a lot of guys went through back then, which was whether it was going to war, like being attacked, and, you know, having an amazing story behind each one of these life-changing instances. So that was just an amazing insight to where at that moment, I kind of stopped looking at my scar as being a negative, because for a long time, it caused me this insane depression while I was in college. Like, you know, and a depression to where I would turn to alcohol, to where I would turn to drugs, to where I would turn to things because I didn't want to face the reality that was what I had on my face and what I had to go through in order to get to that level. You know what I mean? And learning to actually verbally be able to speak and communicate about it has been the biggest weight lifted off of my shoulders that I probably ever had. And something that I would urge your audience to do is, like, whatever that thing is, guys, like whatever that thing that maybe you feel chained down to, no matter what it is, maybe you were attacked, maybe you were, you know, molested, maybe whatever it is, maybe your father was an alcoholic and that left an imprint on you. Go back and try to solve that puzzle. Go back and try to fix that problem. The hardest thing that I did was go back and try to solve the problem of the men in my life being very, very ridiculing, and the reality that I was attacked and I was cut open and I almost died. But those are the most important things that I can also say that I've ever done in my life, because they have essentially allowed me to create the confidence that I needed to be able to come on a podcast just like Justin's and try to deliver this message to all of you.
So powerful, man. I love that so much. And, you know, I was very similar in the fact that, like, I didn't tell my story for 8 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was scared of it. I was ashamed of it.
Yeah.
And it was just a very, very negative thing that kind of, plagued me in a sense. But as soon as I, opened up about it and shared it, like, now it's become like a superpower, right? Because it bring me down to kind of the level at which people could resonate, whether
they relate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Whether it was them, going to jail or drugs or whatever it may be, but, or maybe they didn't have anything to do with that situation, but just open up and, like, share your story, whether it's for other people or whether it's just selfishly for yourself. Like, I think I completely agree. I think it's so empowering.
100% accurate, man. 100%.
Well, dude, I definitely wanted to dive into some bodybuilding, but I'm so intrigued in your story right now. I don't save that for another day. Um, but dude, tell me, all right, so this dude cuts you, right? You turn around,
Yeah.
like what? So you're at a party. So like, what
Yeah.
happened after that? Like, do your friends,
Well,
like,
yeah. So all of the people that I was talking to, because basically, what I was doing, I was kind of doing like a farewell, telling everybody how much I love them, I appreciate them, and like, how I'm getting ready to go off and go to college and play football, and I'll be back and all this stuff. And what happened right after I got cut, man, was that my friends realized, whoa, what had happened. And I just see this flood of them run straight past me, and they attacked him. They attacked him so much to where he ended up in the hospital bed next to me while I was having my face sewn back together by a physician. And they essentially put him in a coma for, I think, he was in a coma for 2 weeks after they attacked him. And after that, after he came out of his coma, he was then, I believe he was wheelchaired into the trial, right? Because I obviously had a summons to appear in court. And, I walk in there, still got all these stitches in my face, feeling like Frankenstein. And I basically had to testify in the fact that like this man attacked me, from what the physician told me, 2 inches under where he would have attacked me and I'd be dead. So it was attack with a deadly weapon, and he was sentenced to, I think, 3 years. But at the same time, it's like, does 3 years in prison justify your evil intent to literally try to kill another person? You know what I mean? And it was a very scary moment when I knew that he had gotten out, and like we lived in the same town, and like I'm thinking like, but at the same time, again, I had to rely on my faith and like figure out like, man, why did this happen to me? And at the time, dude, I had no idea why something like that would happen to me. Looking back at it, I know that happened to me because I was destined to share the story, one, but for two, it's because the Lord knew that I was strong enough to handle it, And I do feel like there's a calling in some degree to where I need to be speaking more. There have been a couple instances that have happened in my life over the last year that specifically revolve around church. And whenever I'm there, something very powerful happens. And I feel like it's a calling that I'm supposed to be speaking, about this or about my life in general to a larger audience, to a larger demographic, to people who can really resonate with it, and me be able to share it so that it can help them. But yeah, looking back at it, man, I know that it happened because there was a plan for me, and he knew that I could handle it.
I love that, man. Dude, I wish you could see me. I'm like, well, I guess you can see me, but I'm like, my hands are like shaking.
Yeah, man.
And so, I mean, dude, like, I completely agree. Like, you do need to go out and speak more and tell the story more. Like, you just, like, I don't know, man. I mean, this is the first time I've ever, like, talked to you in a conversation this long, and, like, just in this short amount of time, like, I obviously resonate with it. And I just think that you're, like, this is something that somebody told me too. Like, I just think that you have such a powerful story, and it has the ability to like affect so many people's life. And so it's almost like this is what somebody told me. They're like, it's almost like you're being selfish not sharing the story.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I actually want to, so this kind of just popped up in my mind, but I want to share it because some people are like, well, what do you mean you're feeling a calling, right? Like, what do you mean you're feeling this thing? And there's something that happened, dude. And it was about a year ago. And I'm a member of Grace Family Church here locally in Tampa, Florida. And it just so happened to be one night that I had heard, I believe, I don't remember who I heard it through, but Reverend R.V. Brown. He was coming as a guest speaker. Okay. And he's also the author of the book, Step Up to the Plate, Dad. And at the time, I was really trying to step into this owning of being a man and being a father and, being an amazing father and, being the complete opposite of what I saw growing up as a child, and realizing at a very young age that the man that I knew to be my dad was not a good man. And I'm stepping into this because now I have 3 children. I'm expecting my 4th child on Valentine's Day. And I heard RV Brown was going to be there. And I'm like, man, I got to go. Like, Tanya, we got to get a babysitter. I don't care what's happening. 7 o'clock, we're going. And I show up. And this church is full, Justin. This church is slap full of people. I don't know how many people there were in there. There was probably, I don't know, probably close to 1,000. Okay. Like a lot of people. And he's talking about this prophecy, right? And it's the prophecy of, like, I don't exactly recall what it was. And maybe there's a prophecy of Joseph or something. And it's basically like the crowning of a new king, right? And I'm sitting far away from him. I'm like towards the back, off in the corner, like you probably couldn't have seen me. And he just calls out one person. He doesn't know who I am. You could barely see, like I'm away in the corner, and all out of the blue, he goes, "You," and he points directly at me, and I'm like, is he pointing at me? Because, like, you know, and I was wearing a red shirt, and he goes, "You with the red shirt and the shiny necklace, you come here." And I was like, oh God. And he's like, "Hurry up, run." And I just got up and I just ran up to him. And we go through this prophecy visualization to where I'm basically taking steps back, and then I run up to him. He crowns me, and then I am like the new prophecy. And that was something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And that's why I believe so strongly that, like, there's something there. Now, I also think that, like, you can only ignore it for so long, right? And you can ignore it once, you might be able to ignore it twice, but then at some point in time, it's going to come and it's going to slap you in the face. And I kind of feel like I've ignored it once. And it wasn't that I ignored it. It was just that I thought other things were priority at that time of my life. You know, with growing a business, was trying to be an amazing father to my children and all of this, it just wasn't a top priority. But once I find more freedom in growing my businesses and being able to serve more clients all around the world, I feel like that's going to be something that I'm going to be able to dive into a bit more.
I'm excited for that, man. I mean, dude, I'm fired up just hearing your story.
I love it, man.
I think, you know, I just think to sum this whole conversation up,
yeah,
everybody has a story.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be you getting stabbed in the face or whatever, but, like,
right.
Everybody has a story. And, you know, I think there's just something to be said about sharing your story and talking about it, whether you want to be
right.
public like this, or whether it's just something that you're talking to, you know, friends or family or somebody at the church or whatever it may be. But like you said, if you're holding that in, like, please, I'm empowering you to here's your permission, or talk to me, talk to whoever you want to, but share that story and go out there and don't sit here and keep holding it in, because it's just kind of one of those things. The more and more you hold on to it, the more and more you hold it in, it just sucks the energy. It sucks the life out of you eventually.
Absolutely. And yeah, to wrap that up with saying that it sucks the life out of you is the truest form. I mean, that is the complete truth. We oftentimes hang on to things and we never let them go. And those things that we hang on to eventually don't allow us to reach what we're truly capable of in the world. And something I want to tell you about, because, you know, your audience may be listening and they're like, well, how do I actually tell my story? How do I do that? So I actually did my own kind of I guess you'd call it a case study. Now, granted, I didn't publish it. It's not been published. I just get ideas. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to create a case study with this client, or I'm going to create a case study with myself, because I want to see what comes from it, right? I'm really into the data and doing diving into research and doing all of that. And I wanted to see what was going to come out of this. And at the time, right before Jason's mastermind in Arizona, I realized that by somebody, doesn't matter who it is, by them opening up and telling their story, you basically allow others around you to share their story as well. Now, again, that's with the idea that everybody's holding on to something, right? So I go to Jason's mastermind, and we're at the dinner on the last day. I'm sitting at the head of the table, and there's about 6 people that are within my very close, vocal length, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try something because I want to see if this holds true. I don't recall where I heard it from, but maybe it was on like a Lewis Howes podcast, or maybe it was passively listening to somebody. And I was like, I'm going to try this out. So implement William Grazione case study on getting humans to open up about their stories. And I'm sitting at the head of the table. I'm like, you know what? For me to be a little bit more open about telling this, let me go ahead and have a glass of wine, and then I'm just going to let it flow. And I have a glass of wine. I start talking to this gal sitting right next to me. And after we started to talk and kind of open up, she started to open up a little bit. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go. And I told her the story about me being attacked and how I got the scar and all of that. And everybody within that vocal length became very infatuated with that story. Justin, I am not kidding you when I tell you that every single person within that 6-person radius opened up and told their story. Mm. And for some of them, it was the first time they had ever talked about it.
So powerful.
Like we were having, myself and the girl that I was sitting next to, we were having a very surface level conversation, right? And once I told my story and once everybody started to open up, then she started to talk about everything. Started talking about, like things like her mother, things like her past, some health issues that she was currently dealing with that were weighing on her immensely. And like I said, for probably half of those people, that was the first time they ever told that story. So again, by you putting that out there into the world, I can guarantee you 100% that you will allow other people to share the things that are holding them back. And by them sharing the things that are holding them back, you know what happens? There's a very magical thing that happens, and it basically allows you to not have that chain on you any longer. It is somebody coming up to you with a big old pair of freaking chain clips and just hacking that thing off, and now you can go ahead and you can be set free. Every time I tell the story, it's like somebody throws a 100-pound sandbag off of my back. You guys doing CrossFit, you know what that feels like when you got to pick up the bags and you're like lifting them over your head and you're doing all your cleans and stuff. It's like somebody taking that bag and just throwing it off of you, and you're done with that workout. Like, it is the best feeling ever. So yeah, guys, like, don't be scared to open up. Don't be scared to, just share something about yourself with somebody that you feel like needs the message, because you will allow them to open up about something that's holding them back. And in my opinion, that communication and that letting go of all of those negative things is what can change the world in a positive light.
Dude, I love that so much, man. It's so powerful. Like, this whole interview today was so powerful. So dude, thank you so much for taking the time and like just sharing your story and opening up. Like, I hope, guys, those of you that are listening to this, like, I hope that this just, gives you that permission slip to go out there and just like start living your life. Like, don't be shackled to the chains of your past. Like, your past does not define you. Like, nobody cares about the past. Like, as much as we think that people care or judge us or whatever it may be, like, your past is your past. Your story is your story. And, I would just empower y'all to go out there and share your story with somebody else. Like, you never know. It could literally change your life. So, William, dude, thank you so much for taking the time, my man. We'll have to schedule another one here to dive into bodybuilding. But
maybe we'll talk bodybuilding in the next podcast.
There we go. Well, awesome. I'm going to sign us off here, and then we'll finish out.
All right, awesome.